Hey everyone, welcome back. We get so many requests for deep dives, and I have to say, this next one is one that's really blown up our inbox lately. We're diving into ignorance.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I'm actually pretty excited about this one because, at first glance, ignorance, it seems pretty straightforward, right? Like you don't know something.
Yeah.
But our listeners, they're smart cookies. They know there's got to be more to it than that, and they are hungry for a deeper dive, and I think we've got the perfect source to dig into.
Okay, lay it on me. What are we diving into?
Understanding ignorance. It's not just about defining it. It's like a whole exploration of what it means and how to overcome it.
I like it. So what's the first misconception we're tackling?
Well, the source really challenges that simple definition of ignorance as just a lack of knowledge.
Hmm.
It's saying there's more to it.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like you can lack knowledge about something, but what you do with that lack of knowledge, that's where things get interesting, right?
Exactly. And the source really digs into that. It's like ignorance is all tangled up with our actions, our beliefs, like the core stuff we hold on to, and even just how we interact with the world around us.
It's not passive, is it? It's not just an empty space. It's almost like an active way of being sometimes.
And you know what? The source even breaks down ignorance into different types.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How many are we talking?
3.
3 types of ignorance. All right, let's hear it. What's the first one?
All right, so the first one is called innocent ignorance.
Innocent ignorance. Okay, I like that. Tell me more.
So, imagine this. You've never even seen a souffle, let alone baked one. You have no clue what goes into it, how to make it, nothing.
So it's pure like a blank slate. You just don't know because you've never had the chance to learn.
Exactly. You're not deliberately avoiding information or anything like that. You just haven't had the opportunity to learn about it.
Makes sense. That's most of us when we're first born, right? We don't come out with encyclopedias in our brains. We start from scratch.
Right. It's the starting point of any learning journey, really. And I think the key here, and the source kind of hints at this, is recognizing it and being open to, filling that void, filling that space with knowledge.
So innocent ignorance, not necessarily a bad thing.
Not inherently. It's what you do with it that matters, which leads us to the next type. Willful ignorance.
Willful ignorance. Okay, that sounds a little more, I don't know, a little more deliberate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is where things get, maybe a little less innocent. This is about making a choice.
Like choosing to stay in the dark even when the lights are on.
Yes. It's like you've got the facts, the evidence, the information right there in front of you, but you're actively choosing to ignore it because it maybe challenges your worldview, your beliefs. It's uncomfortable.
And that's got to be for a reason. I mean, people don't usually choose discomfort for no reason. What's going on there? Why would someone choose to remain willfully ignorant?
Well, and that's a question that the source really digs into. It gets into those deep psychological and sociological factors. And I think a big part of it is that comfort we were just talking about.
Comfort. Okay.
It's easier, right, to stick with what, even if it's not the whole truth, than to face something new that might shake things up.
Yeah. Right. Right. Especially if that shaking things up feels like a threat to our identity, our beliefs, our whole understanding of the world. It's almost like a defense mechanism, even if it ends up hurting us in the long run.
Exactly. And the source is very clear about the dangers of this kind of ignorance. It's like the breeding ground for those harmful ideologies, conspiracy theories.
Oh, absolutely. Because if you're actively rejecting anything that contradicts your viewpoint, well, it's easy to get stuck in an echo chamber of misinformation.
Right. And that's when it goes from being a personal choice to something that can have much wider, sometimes even dangerous consequences.
Okay, so we've got innocent ignorance, we've got willful ignorance. What's the third type?
The third one is cultural ignorance.
Cultural ignorance. I think I have an idea, but tell me more. What does the source say about that one? And what's fascinating about cultural ignorance is that it's not just about, like, geography or ethnicity, right? It's about all those different bubbles we live in, even within our own communities.
Yeah, like those echo chambers we were talking about earlier with willful ignorance.
Exactly. It's like we all have our own little pockets of experience, and it's easy to forget that other perspectives even exist.
And that's where those stereotypes and biases start to creep in, right? Because if we don't actively seek out different viewpoints, it's easy to make assumptions about entire groups of people.
And those assumptions can have real-world consequences.
Okay, so we've got these 3 types of ignorance, but the source doesn't just stop at defining them. It goes deeper, talking about how ignorance in all its forms has this ripple effect.
It's not just an individual thing, right?
No.
It's bigger than all of us.
Exactly. It impacts society as a whole. And one of the examples the source uses is climate change.
Oh, that's a good one. Because with climate change, we have all this scientific knowledge, right? Like decades of research and evidence.
But we still see so much resistance to actually accepting that knowledge and doing something about it.
And that's where those different types of ignorance come into play again.
Yeah, it's like a perfect storm.
You've got some people who are maybe in that innocent ignorance category.
They just haven't been exposed to the information, or they haven't had the opportunity to really dig into it.
Right. And then you've got the willful ignorance.
People who are actively choosing to ignore the science, maybe because it clashes with their political beliefs or their economic interests.
Or it's just too overwhelming to face, so they just tune it out.
And then, of course, you've got cultural ignorance mixed in there, too.
Because how different cultures perceive and interact with the environment, that's a huge factor.
Totally. Like, what might seem like normal consumption in one culture could be seen as excessive or even reckless in another.
And those cultural perspectives, they're deeply ingrained, right? They're tied to history, to values, to beliefs.
It's not just about individual choices anymore. It's about these larger systems that we're all a part of.
And the source really drives home the potential consequences of all this.
Yeah, it paints a pretty stark picture, actually.
More extreme weather events, rising sea levels, disruptions to ecosystems.
Basically, a planet that's becoming less and less habitable with each passing year.
It's a lot to process.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to feel kind of helpless in the face of all this, you know? Like, if ignorance is this massive force with such huge consequences, what can we actually do about it?
Well, the good news is the source doesn't just leave us doom scrolling about climate change. It actually offers some solutions.
Okay, good. Because I was about to say, I need a little bit of hope right now. What's the first step?
Awareness.
Awareness. Okay.
Yeah.
So being aware of those different types of ignorance we talked about.
Exactly. Like recognizing our own biases, those blind spots we all have. That's the first step to actually addressing them.
It's like that saying, you don't know what you don't know.
And once you know what you don't know, you can start to fill those gaps. And the source actually lays out like 5 key actions we can take.
5 actions. Okay, I'm listening.
So the first one is to actively seek knowledge.
Okay, so not just waiting for information to come to us, but actually going out and finding it.
Exactly. And not just from the sources you always go to. Branch out a little.
Get out of those echo chambers.
Yes. Read something you wouldn't normally read. Talk to someone with a different perspective.
I could see how that would be important for breaking down cultural ignorance, especially.
Absolutely. And it's not just about passively consuming information either. The source really stresses the importance of critical thinking.
Okay, so questioning what you read, what you hear, not just taking it at face value.
Exactly. Ask yourself, like, who's saying this? Why are they saying it? What's their agenda? What are other perspectives on this issue?
That can be tough, though, right? Like, challenging your own beliefs, really digging into those uncomfortable truths.
It's not always easy, but the source argues that it's essential for growth.
Okay, so we've got seeking knowledge, challenging our beliefs. What's next?
Conversation.
Conversation. Okay, so talking to people who are different from us.
And not just talking, but really listening. Like actively listening, trying to understand where they're coming from.
Oh, I see. So not just waiting for your turn to talk, but actually trying to step into their shoes, see the world through their eyes.
And that takes humility, which is actually the next point the source makes.
Humility. That's interesting. What does that look like in the context of ignorance?
Well, it's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers.
Which can be hard to admit sometimes.
It can, but it's so important because when we cling to the idea that we're always right, we close ourselves off to new information, new perspectives.
So humility is about being open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's when real learning can happen.
I like that. Humility is a pathway to knowledge. It's not something you hear every day. Okay, we've got 4 down. What's the 5th action?
It's probably the simplest, but it's so important. Share what you learn.
Sharing. Okay, so it's not enough to just gather all this knowledge for ourselves.
Yeah.
We need to spread it around.
Exactly. Talk to your friends, your family, your community, write a blog post, start a conversation online. The more we share what we're learning, the more we can help chip away at that ignorance, you know?
It's like we all have a responsibility to not only educate ourselves, but to help educate others.
That's what the source is saying. It's a collective effort.
This has been amazing. Like, I knew ignorance was a big topic, but I didn't realize how deep it really goes.
Right. It's so much more than just not knowing.
And the thing is, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all this, right? Like the world can feel really complicated and the problems can feel really big.
Yeah.
But what I love about this source about this deep dive is that it doesn't just leave us feeling hopeless.
It gives us tools. It
Yeah.
gives us a path forward.
Exactly. And it reminds us that we all have a role to play in making the world a little bit less ignorant, a little bit more understanding. And that's something I can get behind.
Me too.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive on ignorance, I want to leave you with a little something to think about. Think back to a time when you realized you were wrong about something. Maybe you hold a belief that you later learned was inaccurate, or maybe even harmful. What prompted that shift in your own understanding? How did it change how you viewed the world or even yourself? It's in those moments of self-reflection, those moments of willingness to re-examine what we think we know, that real growth happens. So keep asking questions, stay curious, and never underestimate the power of embracing not knowing. Until next time, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.